Hey, shalom, 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 lakam, which is peace unto you all. Hayawam tawab la atam zahikam yawam or chagadal Charlotte, which is good day. This is your brother Yawam from the JMS camp in Charlotte. Na chamatam kaya hamlakata shamayim kwarab. Repent ye for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Call halayim la la b'nawa Yahweh bahasham Yahweh shai bahasham rocha hakodash wa mashana la zakonim nawa wa malakim shor chagadal, which is all praises to our Father Yahweh, which means He exists. Bahasham, in the name Yahweh Shai, delivers in double honors to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone. Salat. Feeling a little under the weather. But this is an article on people.com, and it says Pringles, Nutella, Cheerios, among thousands of products recalled for exposure to rodent waste. It says the company is urging consumers who purchase the affected products to destroy their products as soon as possible, per the recall announcement. It says need to know thousands of food items, pet foods, beauty products, and drugs were recalled, and Gold Star Distribution Inc. December announcement that the recall was initiated after the FDA determined that the facility had insanitary conditions, including rodent and bird waste. Exposure to contaminated products could cause illness like salmonella and leptospirosis. All right. And, this is for a variety of reasons, but chiefly, the wicked is in rulership. All right. It says thousands of food items pretty much was recalled in a couple of months ago, or just in times past, because I've seen it several times. All right. It'll say, Audi, they use plastics or microplastics. Microplastics pretty much getting into their food, or they got fake food and so on and so forth. All right. And that's been various different companies. All right. It says insanitary conditions, including rodent and bird waste. Let me get a quick precept real fast, though. This is Second Esdras chapter 5 and verse 8. And it says, there shall be a confusion also in many places, and the fire shall be oft sent out again, and the wild beasts shall change their places, and mistress woman shall bring forth monsters. And this is ultimately talking about in the times of the end. And pretty much, wild beasts is changing their places, currently, due to things like Esau's gentrification. All right. Pretty much, here in the Charlotte area, they got something to where, they pretty much making the I-77 bigger. Also, how they pretty much building up these different sky rises and just different buildings. All right. And ultimately what that's doing is displacing animals. So they in the same spots as these factories, as these, different companies and stuff like that. So that's, that already creates an atmosphere ultimately to where, that's impeding on that animal space, So, and again, it's ultimately due to, who's in rulership. This man ultimately doesn't represent what's good. All right. So let's get this as well. And I'm going to go back to the article. This is Psalms chapter 10, and we'll get verse 3. And it says, it says, for the wicked boasteth of his heart's desire, and blessed the covetous, whom the Lord abhorreth. All right. Psalms 10 and 3, for the wicked boasteth of his heart's desire, and blessed the covetous, whom the Lord abhorreth. All right. And ultimately, the wicked boast, all right, about his heart's desire, all right, his NWO. All right. NLT, it says, for they brag about their evil desires. They praise the greedy and curse the Lord. All right. And ultimately, them ultimately bragging about, their evil desires. All right. It comes by way of, them putting it into their entertainment. All right. They're boasting, they're using it as entertainment. But yet, they're prophesying on the left-hand side, ultimately, of their NWO. All right, that represents, them boasting of what they want to do. And then also, when they get on these podcasts and stuff like that, they'll come out openly and say it. And that ultimately is, again, them prophesying on the left-hand side, of what they want to do, Because, before he does something, he tries to, because the left hand mimics the right hand. All right, before the right hand works, ultimately it's prophesied about. All right, and then it occurs. All right, so the left hand tries to mimic the right hand. All right, that's why it says, for the wicked boasteth of his heart's desire, and blessed the covetous, whom the Lord abhorreth. The wicked, through the pride of his countenance, would not seek after the Most High. The Most High is not in all of his thoughts. All right, so The Lord isn't in Esau Edom's thoughts. All right, Esau Edom, the so-called white man, he's not thinking about how to run the world righteously. All right, what's on his mindset, all right, is ultimately how he can create a society, a dystopian society, to where everything is under his rule. All right, and everything is fake. All right, for those that are ultimately in society. All right, while he got the opportunity, just as of now, he has the opportunity to get real resources and things like that. But for the masses of the people, ultimately, they give the masses of the people, what's fake. All right, hence, why they ultimately push out, chemtrails. All right, it's fake air. All right, that's why everybody's getting sick. All right, it's fake snow. All right, it's plastic. It's plastics and different chemicals in the snow. Everybody's mourning. And that's because of the rulership of the wicked. All right, so going back to this article, it says nearly 2,000 products have been recalled due to the presence of rodent and bird contamination. It says Gold Star Distribution Inc. has recalled thousands of foods, pet foods, beauty products, and drugs distributed to 3 states, according to a notice shared by the USDA, FDA, in which why is food and drug in the same thing, because even in that, food and drugs should not be together, because they use foods as drugs. All right. The food colorings are the different, little nanoparticles and stuff they put in the food. They use those things as drugs, and pretty much a drug is pretty much, something that alters the mental estate, because you are what you eat. That's why the scriptures tell us, ultimately to be cognizant of our meat and diet, roughly paraphrasing. All right, because how we eat is going to reflect how we act and how we are as people, And Esau understand that. That's why he puts different things into the food. All right, it says the recall, which was initially released on December 26th, was prompted after FDA determined that Minneapolis-based facility was operating under insanitary conditions, including the presence of rodent excreta, rodent urine, and bird droppings. This means that the affected products may have been in contact with surfaces with airborne particles of animal waste. Exposure to these contaminated products could cause illness like salmonella and leptospirosis, a bacterial disease from exposure to animal urine. All right. And let me see. I'm going to skip down a little bit. All right. Right here. It says candies like, in which we shouldn't really be eating candy like that. It says affected products were distributed to stores in Indiana, Minnesota, and North Dakota. A specific list of retailers can be found on the FDA's website here. The list of affected items spans across cosmetics, things we put on the skin. You put it on your skin. All right. Essentially, by putting different things onto the skin, it seeps into the pores. All right. And that also is a way that it's entered into the bloodstream. All right. And that's why, again, cosmetics is being, it's in the sector of the FDA, because they use cosmetics as drugs as well. It says drugs, pet food, household items, in which with the pet food, they pretty much, they understand, like, just from those things getting into the pet food, that'll increase like parasites and things of that nature, because dogs, they have made different videos to where, how parasites travel through cats, so through different animals. All right, Esau understands that things can be spread, and ultimately they putting it out as if, it was a mistake, but they understand that these things are going on. All right. It says household items and food beverages. Let me get a quick preset real fast. This is Proverbs Mashallah, chapter 29. We'll give verse 2. It says, when the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice. But when the wicked beareth rule, the people mourn. All right, and I'm going to start from verse 1. And it's Proverbs 29:1. It says, he that being often reproved hardeneth his neck shall suddenly be destroyed, and that without remedy. So ultimately, this is ascribed to those that continually they're that continual sound are in Esau's ears will be the prophets, you see, because this word has been going out, so if they wanted to say they didn't understand, but essentially before the last, 40 years or so, because that's how long, our elders and apostles have been out, that they will be lying. The Esau Edom will be lying if he say he didn't understand that the different foods is destroying the people. All right, because the warning has went out. All right, it says, he that being often reproved hardeneth his neck shall be suddenly destroyed, and that without remedy. And then also Esau has done a diligent search, so he understands what he's doing is completely wrong. And that's ultimately why, we can see his kingdom is being destroyed. As pursuant to this right here. Let's get this right here. This is Second Esdras, chapter 10. All right, or Bonsarat, chapter 10. All right, and we'll get let me see, verse 8. It says, because of unrighteous dealings, injuries, and riches got by deceit, the kingdom is translated from one people to another. All right, so unrighteous dealings, Esau Edom ultimately, his dealings are unrighteous. It says injuries. All right, a lot of things is injuries on various different facets. All right, but one of those injuries, all right, is the people that's being injured, by eating the foods that's in this man's society. All right, and which injuries that can go into a multitude of things. You see, but then it says, and riches got by deceit. How this kingdom ultimately has been established is through rape, robbery, and murder, and that's ultimately how he obtains everything that he wants. It was an article one time. I think it was in Ghana or something like that. But they found a lot of gold. All right, and with that gold, they was like, yeah, it was like a couple thousand tons of like gold or something like that, and they was like, yeah, like they might want to remove. It was people, like on YouTube and these different little forums and stuff like that. They was like, yeah, they might want to, take that off the news because they understand that Esau even gonna go in and pretty much going in with his deception. Because if he wants some resources or if he want a specific space for whatever reason, he won't say why he's going into a certain part of the earth. He'll say, oh, they got weapons of mass destruction, or they got this going on, or they got that going on, and that's that deceit, and that's ultimately how he gets down. He sees the area that he wants. And it was prophesied that he would get the fatness of the earth, but the how he obtains it is through that deceit. It says, because of unrighteous dealings, injuries, and riches got by deceit, the kingdom is translated from one people to another. Hey, the kingdom is being translated, because this man is not ruling in righteousness. I'm gonna get this too. Let's get Matthew chapter 24, and we'll get verse 22, and it says, and except those days should be shortened, there should no flesh be saved. But for the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened, because life wouldn't continue on, all right, if, things were to keep going, like the birth rate is hella low, all right. It's a war, a gender war, all right. And then also it's a war amongst, Esau's own people, like they ain't really reproducing like that. And then the so-called white woman is essentially despising Esau be hating because Jake be dealing with Edomites, you see, but ultimately they're not really reproducing like that. And then also amongst Jake too, Jake ain't really reproducing because of the rulership of Esau Edom, the different contraceptive methods and when I say contraceptive, all right, monogamy is a contraceptive. All right, and the mindsets, the lifestyle. This lifestyle cannot continue. All right, this is surviving. This is not livable. To be sick every once in a while, that shouldn't be a thing. It shouldn't be microplastics in the rain or the snow. All right, this is not a lifestyle. It's a death style. So I'm gonna get a couple more, and that'll be it. But this is Proverbs, Mashallah, chapter 29, finishing out the verse 2. It says, when the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice. All right. And that's because ultimately the righteous is going to rule in the righteous rule book, the scriptures. All right. That's going to be the standard. All right. Whereas here in this society, all right, what Esau feels is the standard. All right. Whatever they feel like doing, that's essentially what they're going to do. It says, when the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice. But when the wicked beareth rule, the people mourn. Right now, everybody's mourning. All right. Nothing is livable. This ain't real food. No real clothes. All right. The people ain't even real, so everybody pretty much is mourning, and that's due to the rulership of Esau Edom. Now, I want to get one more and that'll be it. But this is Ezekiel chapter 4, and we'll get verse 13. And it says, and the Lord said, even thus shall the children of Yashar'Allah. I'm going to start at verse 9. All right. Ezekiel, Yachazak Allah, chapter 4 and verse 9. And it says, defiled bread. It says, take thou also unto thee wheat, barley, and beans, and lentils, and millet, and fishes, and put them in one vessel, and make thee bread thereof, according to the number of the days that thou shalt lie upon thy side, 390 days shalt thou eat thereof, and thy meat which thou shalt eat shall be by weight, 20 shekels a day. From time to time shalt thou eat it. Thou shalt also water. Thou shalt drink also water by measure, the sixth part of an hin. From time to time shalt thou drink, and thou shalt eat it as barley cakes. And thou shalt bake it with dung that cometh out of man in their sight. And the Lord said, even thus shall the children of Yasharallah eat their bread defiled among the Gentiles, whither I will drive them. And ultimately, we have eaten our bread defiled. Bread is our food. We consume bread. So ultimately, our bread is defiled. All right, animal feces, animal urine, and so on and so forth. Like we got in our article, and many more things, which we try to eat, clean to the best of our ability, but in this society, this devil, sneaks things in, all right, unbeknownst to us, all right, disguising them as different chemicals and things of that nature, all right. Ultimately, that's why the kingdom is being translated, so just want to go into that. Adawan Tazah, Zabanaya Palos, with that was a beautiful edification to the spirit. Wadawan Tazah, Adam Yashawam Tawab, Lord's will, you have a good day. Wa shalom lakam, which is peace and TYA. Shalom, shalom.